Welcome back to the Get Rek'd podcast. My name's Ray.
I'm Lars.
Thanks for joining us today. Cheers.
Sorry, I'm slow on the uptake. Dak Savage.
All right. So for everyone following along in the book, we are on page 43, or day 43.
Of the Love Dare 365.
Yep.
And we're excited to be on week 7.
Is it week 7 or week 8?
Week 7.
Oh, I thought we were on week 8 for some reason. Darn.
Happens.
I like even numbers. Whatever. Anyways, so today starts with love does its homework. Looking at Proverbs 25 verse 2, which says, "It is the glory of God to conceal a matter and the glory of kings to investigate a matter." So today was really talking about how basically whenever conflict arises, rather than, jumping the gun or having these kind of negative automatic reactions, you should take the time to investigate instead and ask questions of why did our loved one do what they did, and then also asking ourselves why are we reacting the way we're reacting, which there's another section that kind of goes into that deeper. But I mean, that was initially what I thought reading this, though, was it's important to understand why the other person's doing what they're doing or said what they said, but I almost think it's more important to understand why you yourself reacted the way you did, and get to the root of that. But it also talked about, are you listening or are you coming up with a response? So even if you are asking those questions to dig deeper and understand further, are you actually listening, or are you coming up with your answer or your response as they're talking? Which I know I've definitely done before, especially when I was younger.
Well, that's certainly my initial response. I have to actively tell myself to listen.
Yeah.
So I especially like Proverbs 25 too, because it really outlines the importance of, God may conceal a matter in something, right? And then it's your glory, it's to your glory, to your betterment, to your, to everything, the best you could be, to go and investigate it, to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I'm incredibly inquisitive. I really like to, if I don't know something, I want to go figure it out. And so I really liked that. And it's one of the things that, I think this week's kind of funny because of the dare, right? Which is essentially write down 5 things that upset you about your spouse, and then tear it up, right? Yeah. And forgive them for it. And it was kind of hard for us to come up with 5 things, because we so regularly do that very thing almost, right? We don't necessarily write them down, but we really take time to talk about it.
Yeah, we don't really let anything slide.
And do our homework, right? So we do our homework. Yeah. And I think that helps us to be a little more loving with one another, even when, maybe we get into a little tiff, like about building a fence, for example, or something, And we have come to understand also that, hey, sometimes you feel like I'm criticizing you when I'm just asking questions because this is a problem that I thought of that might come up or something, do we have a solution for it? Do we have something we can do? And because we have been able to talk about that, when those things come up, we're able to better, hey, this is why I'm saying this. I'm not trying to, criticize you or whatever. And so that was kind of hard to do because we don't really hold grudges, or at least, I don't know.
I had a list of 10 things, so I'm kidding.
Dang, she didn't even tell me, so I guess here we go. No.
I couldn't even come up with one, so.
Well, whatever. No, so I think this is huge. I think you should see it as, everybody sits there and talks about. The reason why I think I like this verse so much is that, it says it's to the glory of kings to investigate them, right? And everybody wants to think they're their own hero and they are their own hero in their own life, right? Or whatever, and so on. And so you're actually being, that you're elevating yourself to like kingly status, sort of, when you begin to investigate and really dive deep into a subject. And so I like that a lot. And I think that, it does help you to be more loving, right?
Well, and I want to point out too, there's a difference between investigating for your own benefit and or finding what you think the answer should be. Like, some people can take that as, oh, well, as long as I'm digging deeper and investigating, and it's like, well, the goal is to determine like the truth, Well,
the goal is love, right? Exactly. So no, you're totally right. And I think so many people, they get their own confirmation bias that they want to do, right? And that leads to so many other problems. Or they just stick in their echo chamber and they're like, I did my research. I did all my research in my normal places. Mm-hmm. And they all say that I'm right. But that's why the whole point is to investigate the concealed things, right? Don't just go find the first headline. Don't just go find the first thing. But, Ray's mad at me because I didn't do the dishes, right? Well, it's probably not because I didn't do the dishes. There's something deeper there, right? Like maybe you had a really hard day or something, And so investigating that and being like, hey, like, is everything okay? Or talking, right? It's all out of love, and that's how you find the like true solution. Mm-hmm. Hopefully this week will be a lot shorter because we say that every week, but when I was going through this to, sort of organize my thoughts for this conversation, I was like, man, this will be pretty quick, I think.
And I'm realizing more and more about myself that I do not have a lot of expansive thoughts on topics. So thank goodness Lars is here, or we would have like a 5-minute podcast every week.
She just does them all like in the middle of the night. She'll be like, hey, you ever thought about this? What? I'm trying to go to sleep.
I don't know.
But
so in case you missed it, this week's dare is for you guys to write down 5 things your spouse has done to make you angry, and ask God for patience and wisdom and to keep you from harboring any bitterness. And then you tear up the list as an act of love and forgiveness.
And I think you could do this for other people, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do, since this is something we do for each other already, sort of.
Yeah.
Almost on like the daily. I'm trying to think of ways to do this with others, right? Mm-hmm. Expand outside our scope, continue outside the family.
No, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of this book that I apply to, friends and family and not just us.
No, right. And that's why, so this week, I think that's where a lot of my focus was. Mm-hmm. And, I'm really, you never know what's going on with somebody, right? So do your homework on them. Investigate why they are the way they are. Mm-hmm. And, need to do a video on our dog Brew, but like there's some, one of those profound experiences, right, that is attached to him and the things we go through with him. We have to do, if people did their homework on more individuals, if they really investigated why somebody was the way they were, maybe they'd have a little more love, give them a little more grace. Mm-hmm. And some people just suck. Like that is true. But you'd be surprised how many people just need somebody to give them a chance. Mm-hmm. So, but anyway, moving on to day 44. Love examines the heart. And it gives us Psalm 139:23.
Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my concerns.
So I love this verse just because it gives me a lot of solace.
Yeah.
Because it's probably laziness, but I know that I forget so many people that I should pray for, or so many things that I should be praying for, or, the question, how am I supposed to pray, right? Or whatever. And, oh, did I say this right? Did I, it's not a freaking genie in a bottle, right? Like, if you say your wish wrong, now you're going to turn into an elephant instead of, whatever. So it's not, God knows what's in your heart, and then he's going to test it, right? I think, this morning we sort of had that, and with some stuff that, happened in our family. And it's funny because I literally prayed about that last night really hard and spent a lot of time, and then this morning something happens.
Yeah.
Right? That tests, do you really trust? Are you really, is your faith really there? And, so I think that's why I like, this psalm specifically.
Yeah.
And then, it just sort of goes deeper into, and talks about how often our anger is actually, when we're mad at something, it's actually because of something about us or something that we did, or, not necessarily the thing that we're claiming to be angry about. I think about when my phone was on the back of your car and we found it the next day in the middle of an intersection. I wasn't so mad about the phone as mad as I was man, I spent money on this thing, and now I'm going to have to spend more money on it or whatever because I'm an idiot and didn't do the right thing. You know what I mean? So it's not that I was upset about the phone or any of that. It's more that I was upset that maybe I set us back. Does that make sense? And so that kind of made me think. And then, I don't know, I can't think of anything specific right now, but I know specifically when I was younger, I would be real angry when somebody did something that I knew that I was also guilty of.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very true. You need to be reflecting. We talk about that a lot on here, right? But that's one of the ways you flex the muscle, right, is reflect and figure it out.
Well, and that's what today's all about, is questioning yourself and understanding the root cause of why you get upset about things. So, like we said earlier, not just asking the person of what was their motive and why did they do what they did, but digging deeper and finding out for yourself, why did you react the way you did? And that's so much more telling. And that's what's really going to heal how you react to other things, because usually it's not actually what the other person just did. It's something within you that is troubled or guilty or, pride, all these different things. And when you start to address those as being the root cause versus the other person being the root cause, then you can start healing and changing the way you react to things.
Yeah. It's the whole remove the plank from your own eye, right? Before you attempt to remove the sliver from others.
Yeah.
And, and then several people in my life, I don't know, maybe it's bigger. I think it's become very famous because of Jordan Peterson or whatever now, but, Admiral McRaven gave a speech about making your own bed one time, and but the whole point is you need to take care of your own life before you can sit there and be worried, before you should be worried about others.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, how can you possibly solve the world's problems if you can't solve the problems in your own home?
Yeah.
Or in your own heart? How are you supposed to how are you supposed to help somebody else heal if you have a bunch of pain and, you're going to be throwing your own problems into that, right? Bringing your own baggage to that problem.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, do you mind pulling up Lamentations 3:39 through 40? My mustache is bothering me today. Like, I feel like there's a hair that's doing something crazy.
39 through 40.
Yep. So then at the end of day 44 was just conversation read Lamentations and then sort of give your thoughts.
It says, why should the living complain when punished for their sins? Let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. So obviously, very straightforward encouragement right there to examine your ways and come to the Lord. And some things that I had written down specifically to reflect with when praying is to ask God for clarification, for forgiveness, for healing, for knowledge, for deliverance from different things. You know, you can do, I think, like a problem that I have is I will try and do all this problem solving on my own. And I go off and I'm thinking about it so much. But what I neglect to do is invite God into that conversation and ask him to help me. You know, I had went back to do one of the daily devotionals, and I don't remember what day it was, but it was the one about being a helper and how we need help. And it just made me realize how much I don't ask God for help when he's our number one helper.
Yeah.
And so
That's a good way to look at that.
You know, taking advantage of that and bringing literally everything to him.
Well, that's the importance of quiet time, right? Like time away from, even time away from books, right? You know, I think one of the hardest things about us now working in tandem here is that I haven't really gotten the quiet time that I normally used to get every morning, because you'd be off working with patients or whatever. And I would literally, the number of times I've just looked out this window and just ran through a bunch of different thoughts and and sort of just meditated on a bunch of different things. No book, no, music, no, just me and my brain working through stuff, right? And my heart, sort of focused on God, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important to do. And that'll help you sort of find those other problems, right? Or you find the ways that you need God to step in, right? Because you do need to be working to solve your problems, right?
Yeah.
I think, yes, miracles can happen, but that's only if you're doing, I think you need to be showing a little bit of effort yourself, right? Not that I think that that's how you get to heaven or whatever, a whole nother conversation. I think that's through Christ alone, but I think it's super important that we're doing what we can and continuing, because that's how we're going to grow. That's how we're going to, get closer to the one that we want to be like, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. You good with day 44?
Yep.
All right. Day 45. Love trusts God's purposes. And it gives us Romans 8:28.
We know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, those who are called according to his purpose.
So, I literally just wrote, what are your thoughts, Ray?
Why do you do this to me? No warning ever.
Nope. Put you on the spot. Boom. Go.
Well,
let God speak through you.
I had posed a question for everyone of what can we trust about God? Like, what does God tell us in the Bible about himself? Go.
I feel like that's such a simple answer, like everything. I can trust God with everything. What do you mean? I guess, I don't know.
Bam. That's it. That's it. It's that simple. So, worrying about our relationships and life and all this stuff.
Bam. That's it.
Is, pointless. And my dad, my entire life, has always, told me, like, what's the point in worrying? Why are you looking at me that way? Anyways, what's the point in worrying? It doesn't help change anything.
Yeah.
And that's just what this chapter is about, is trusting God, period, with everything. Again, it doesn't mean you're not trying and you're not praying and you're not actively pursuing whatever, but that you have trust that God is going to lead each step, and that no matter how it turns out, he has his hand on that and he's with you. And,
Yeah.
Well,
I think, like, I love that we've been doing this, because there's so many little nuggets that I've sort of grabbed a hold of or whatever that now stick in my mind every time we do something,
Yeah.
But, like, the spirit of fearfulness thing, like, I knew that verse, but, like, to focus on it through this, right? Mm-hmm. And go, it sticks better, instead of just sort of like, yeah, I've gone through that, or I've heard that, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I really like when you start to think about it, like, am I worried about this? Like, if I'm worried, is it fear, right? And almost always it is.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you know me, I have a problem with, like, limited edition things or something, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Or I'm like, ooh, you know what? This thing there's only, like, some odd amount of these. There's 30 of these in the whole world, and it's related to something in my life. And when am I ever going to get a chance at this again? All right. And then I, will get it or whatever.
And then it sits there collecting dust, never being touched or anything.
It's not
taking
always
up
true.
space in our very tiny home.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully that'll be fixed soon. But, like, that's one of those things that I think about, and I go, that's a spirit of fearfulness thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like, the thing that I am worried about is that I'll never get a chance at that thing again. And maybe
well, you're also putting so much value in something that's earthly.
Oh, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like, it's totally pointless.
Yeah. No, it's absolute vanity. Like, and that's where, it's one of those things that I think about, and I'm not nearly as bad as I used to.
Next time, I'm going to replay this video. Like, are you sure you want this thing? Remember?
It's not that bad, but...
No, it's not, but...
But it is something that, I do have that natural instinct. Like, I control it pretty well, but I do have that natural instinct of, like, ooh, like, oh man, what if I never get a chance at this? Mm-hmm. Especially considering certain things that we do, with our business and stuff like that, like, aren't necessarily going to be allowed to exist, if things persist in certain directions, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a little different than a collection book or doll or whatever.
I'm not...
Okay, doll's not the right word, but like action figure thing, whatever.
What do you mean?
Like those little dudes.
Little Funko Pops. Okay, so she really likes this character, and I found one that was like, 1 of 100, and I was like, oh, cool, I'll get this for her. That's not the same. It's not what I'm talking about here.
No, I know, but I'm saying, I understand what you're saying, but these other things.
No, so I didn't do that out of the same sort of spirit there. But it's things like, I don't know if I like to tinker and I like to work on stuff, and and so sometimes I'm like, oh man, what if this part never comes back in stock, right? And then I can't use it, and then I can't find it ever again, or whatever, And maybe I blame some of my past work for this, 1 is none, 2 is 1 kind of thing. So I feel like if I only have 1 of something, I'm screwed, because if it breaks, then I don't have a way to do it.
I'm dying of heat all of a sudden.
It's because our AC is in a room that's closed off right now. So that's the problem. But anyway, so that's just kind of, don't worry about things, right? Leave it to God. If you're supposed to don't buy it when you're afraid, I guess. It's sort of something that I've told myself over the years when I'm trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you don't need that thing or whatever. And then this just reinforces that, right?
Yeah.
My own knowledge that I'm being stupid is then reinforced by the biblical verse.
The line that I like is, God can take anything and use it for your good and his glory. So whether things turn out how you want them or not, or good or bad, God can still take that and use it for his glory, and that's what matters.
Yeah. So on to day 46.
Yep. Love dies to self. Luke 9, verse 23. If anyone wants to come with me, he must deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me.
So we talk about the ego a lot in our house.
Yeah.
And, specifically because we talk about it from the perspective of the resistance, right? And just how your ego controls so many things. Mm-hmm. And almost always leads to ruin, right?
Yeah.
And when you finally let go of that and you're not so attached to it, you can get so much done. I think about my health and stuff like that, right? And some of the changes we've had to do that we kind of I denied a lot of things because I was like, no, I'm still healthy. I'm still doing all the right stuff. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. I don't need to go to an extreme in one direction or another, right? Mm-hmm. I'm doing the right stuff. But dude, you only have a third of your body to work that works, right? So only a third of your body is able to actually do things. Plus that's caused a bunch of other problems, and so you do have to kind of change things. You do have to be a little more extreme in order to get to where you want to go. Mm-hmm. And I had to put my ego away, right? I couldn't be, my 6,000 calorie a day self that I used to be, or whatever, and just not care. I couldn't be, I can eat anything and, I'll work it off.
Yeah.
Or whatever. I can't do that anymore. And I had to take that part of me that had been that way for, a decade, right? Yeah. And just, nope, can't do that anymore. I was a little guy in high school even. Well, not relative to my age, but I was 2-3 years younger than all my classmates. So when I'm playing varsity football as a freshman, I'm only 12 years old. So I had to gain weight really fast. So I ate a lot, and I had that problem for years. So probably 14, 15 years that I ate like that, just trying to be big, right? Mm-hmm. And I was always healthy, but I was also very, active and things like that. And I didn't have only a third of my body that could actually burn calories.
Yeah.
So things like that you have to change. And that was a huge hit to me, as much as I can admit it now, but that sucked for me, and I did not want to admit that for a long time.
Yeah. The line that says he must deny himself, I've said this on so many of our episodes, but our culture, so much is just overconsumption, self-gratification, over and over and over. That's all it pushes. And, when you continuously give in to that, you're giving in to your flesh, to the world, and you're growing farther and farther from God. But that's what our culture pushes. And
those things never satisfy.
The world is the way it is right now.
Yeah. Those things never satisfy because they run out, right?
All right, it's all temporary.
And, but the best I've ever felt in my life is when we're on the right path. Always. And, you know, I sort of...
And denying ourselves of certain things.
Yeah.
You know, when you feel that God is telling you to stay away from something, even though you may really want it or whatever, but you follow God's word and you do continuously stay away from it. And once you kind of make it over that hump of however long it is where you're still desiring it, but you're staying firm and staying with God, once you get past that, it's such a awesome feeling to know that, wow, you know, even though we should be choosing God all the time, it makes it so much more of a huge kind of like smack in the face of when you realize how often you don't choose God and you do choose your own, you know, path and desires and cravings and whatever. But then it also is this huge hit of how good it feels to choose God and to obey and listen. And I don't know, it's really a wonderful feeling realizing that he does have a path for us, and it's different for everyone. And, you know, it's not always this crazy secret of how he wants you to live, you know?
Well, and I think, like, the only place where I think fear is said to be okay in the Bible is fear of God, right? And when I think about all the ego stuff, right, you know, I mean, most people, if you found out the way I eat, it's pretty extreme, and most people think it's crazy, right? But I know now I have a fear of eating differently, right? Like, because it's so unhealthy for me, and I know how much better I am now, right? How much healthier I am now. And that fear is like, you know, I know God sort of put me in this direction and said, like, you know, if you want to be healthy, if you want to continue to heal your body and things like that, like, this is the path you have to go. And it actually, and I feel so much better through it, right? And it's not, don't worry guys, I don't have some sort of, like, you know, eating disorder or something. It's not like that. It's just, I have to be very careful about the things that I ingest because my guts don't work right, you know, and things like that. So I think you've got to kind of, like, that's where, when you start to fear God more than you fear losing that thing, that's the right path, right? Yeah. That change is huge, and that's that hump that I think you're talking about, right? Is when you stop fearing that thing, you know, or stop fearing the lack of that thing or whatever, and start fearing God more. Once you get over that, once that change happens, it's so easy. Yeah. And life is awesome because of it, you know? I think, so then this kind of brought me to, they made a comment about prayer, and, you know, just sort of taking some time with God, you know, and not having time on yourself or whatever. And we've been watching The Chosen, which so far has been pretty great. And I really like their, like, morning prayer and evening prayer, like, just as they're falling asleep, you know, and just as they're waking up. Like, I've sort of started taking that on to myself, and I really enjoy it. It doesn't feel like, because I see it a little differently now, I suppose, than I used to. It's not like, I don't know. Anyway, and that time focusing sometimes is annoying because I'm like, ugh, I just want to pee or whatever. You know, like, I just want to get started with my morning or go to sleep or whatever. But that time is, it is special, and it's something that's good. And I think, you know, is dying to myself, you know, instead of
doing what you feel like doing. You're doing what you know you should be doing.
And it feels better at the end, right?
Yeah. On today 47?
Well, I want to know, do you mind reading, just as a last thought for Love Dies to Self, Luke 9:23 through 27. So the day's verse was 9:23, but then for further reading, it tells us to read on to 27.
23 through 27. Then he said to them all, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? Whoever is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his glory and in the glory of the Father and of the holy angels. Truly, I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the kingdom of God."
So, yeah, I mean, you look at all the philosophers, and the argument is always that the self, the ego, will ruin everything, right? If you're trying to bring all these things, once you get rid of yourself, once you get rid of the ego, life's just easy.
Yeah.
And, surprise, the Bible confirms it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, Christ confirms it. And so with that, move on to day 47, which is love refuses to sin. So again, this is, the next step, right? And it gives us Ephesians 4:26.
"Be angry and do not sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger."
So essentially I took from this, don't let your anger make you sin, right?
Yeah.
Anger is okay. Feelings are okay. I think so many people want to say, like, I shouldn't feel anything or whatever. Or like, I want to get to the point where I don't feel this or whatever. I don't think it's so much that your feeling is bad as much as your actions, right? And so don't let your anger make you sin. Don't let your anger make you act out, attack somebody or whatever. I think that's one of the things that we've worked really hard on, is making sure that we give time when we need to and so on, but also not letting it fester and just ignoring it.
Yeah. That is certainly what I used to do. It was like bad emotion, I'm going to go away by myself, and then eventually stop feeling it, and then I don't address it because I'm like, I don't feel it anymore, so it's fine.
Well, and I think that's love, right? I think we have chosen one another and we love one another, and so we're like, no, we don't want this to continue here.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have either one of us been like, no, we need to talk about this, or like, hey,
yeah,
we got to get off the phone right now, but like once we get on, we need to, I want to talk about this more, or I don't want this to end here, right, or whatever. And
did you underline all this? Did you want me to read all that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead and read that, I suppose, and then, I think I want to finish with that, actually, if I remember correctly. So the thing that I sort of want to talk about specifically about this is when I make a mistake, the thing I need to be very careful about is not, my overreactions and anger almost always come because my heart's like sort of broken, that I may have caused future interactions to be diminished or whatever, right? So like, oh, I made a mistake, I shouldn't have done that or whatever, and I am now, I shouldn't have sinned in that way, and now I feel like people aren't going to trust me in the future or whatever. I mean, the times that that's really what breaks my heart the most. Almost every time I make a mistake or, sin or whatever, is, man, please don't think that's me, right? Please don't think that what I just did out of stupidity or weakness or anger or whatever, by, in my moment of weakness, please don't think that's me. Like, I promise that's not who I want to be. That's not who I will be, and that made me think of, Mary in The Chosen, and how she goes back and, goes back to her old ways, right? And then she just feels like she can't come back into the fold. But it's one of the reasons why I think Christianity is so special. And the message of the Bible is so special. And, you know, Christ's sacrifice and resurrection is so special, is that no matter how many times you mess up, that's why it happened. So that you can be redeemed every day, right? And that doesn't mean just go do whatever you want to do. You actually have to repent, right?
Yeah.
You have to be wanting to be better. But you get grace every day, every time, every moment. And so that means you can get better. All too often, I think everybody kind of knows instinctually, like, if you hold somebody down and you just hold them at, you know, what they did when they were 12 years old or something, they'll never grow, you know, and they'll be worse. It'll fester. But by give them a chance, right? You know, I mean, that's what we've done with some people in our lives. Like, they've made some big mistakes or something like that, and we're trying to show them, like, hey, that's not the end of the world. You can do better.
Yeah.
Because we need that same grace, right? And so I just kind of liked that, because I think that's what I was thinking about as I was reading through this, is, you know, just don't let anger make you sin. And then if you do, know that you are still redeemed. Know that you still have grace. And give it to others too, right? You know, I mean, I think that's why, you know, in the Lord's Prayer, right, you've got the whole help us to forgive others as, you know, you forgive us kind of thing, right? And so with that, I think there's just a whole sort of little paragraph section here that I really liked. And
so it says, anger in marriage presents a widespread threat. Imagine your home with perhaps no fewer problems, but without the presence of anger to keep it stirred up and agitated. Imagine your relationship with the same history and issues, but without anger always reminding you of your past and eroding your hopes for the future.
So that's like, you know, that's why I kind of wanted to end with that, because that's what I was thinking about, right? Like, stop taking these moments. Give your spouse grace. Give your friend grace, right? Help them to understand. Like, imagine what it would be like if they didn't have anger towards you and you didn't have anger towards them, and you said, this happened, but we're going to move forward. We're not going to get caught in this, right? And we do that with our family. We do that with our friends, you know? And so that's just kind of what I was thinking about, is try to think about that, right? Imagine what your life would be like if you didn't have, in all your relationships, if you just got rid of the anger. All the things still happened. Nothing changed. Like, the whole forgive and forget thing, I don't think is a good idea, right? I think you need to forgive. I don't think you necessarily need to forget. Because otherwise, how do you grow? But with that, you have anything else you wanted to talk about that day?
Nope.
So day 48, love is kind, and it gives us Ephesians 4:32.
Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you.
So again, that next step, right? We were just talking about that, and we're moving into the next step.
Yeah.
And
so I had that, you know, for a while there we were talking about patience a ton. So patience is the preventative measure that you're trying to implement to help create better situations in your life and hopefully better reactions and things like that. And then kindness is the proactive response. Yeah. So, you know, how you react once you're in that situation and it wasn't preventable. Are you reacting with kindness? You know, so going back to working on that reflexive muscle of what is your instinctual reaction to things, even when you're upset. What does that look like? Are you being loving? Are you still being kind? Because a lot of times, even though we may feel like the situation may warrant that we can act a certain way, it really doesn't. You know, we never deserve anything. We never have earned the right to do XYZ. And so really trying to remember that no matter the situation, kindness is still the goal. And, what is kindness? Obviously, it's an aspect of love. So getting back to full circle of what this whole thing is about, of just trying to be more loving.
Well, and choose those people, right? Choose them. Choose to interact with them. Choose to figure them out and investigate them, right? And my only sort of thought here, and the thing that I sort of wanted to share, is kindness brings the best out of your community, right?
Yeah.
Always. Where I used to work and things like that, like, there's a definite idea of what people are supposed to act like, what they're supposed to be like, what they're supposed to look like, those things, right? And I think one of the things I found is that people would get crushed, right, because they weren't fitting the mold or whatever. And we would lose out on one of their very, unique capabilities, right? Yeah, maybe they don't fit exactly what we all think we are supposed to look like or do or whatever. But there might be something that, they did make it here somehow, right? And there might be something that they're good at that we aren't, right? And grab hold of that. Find them, use kind, be kind, love them. I didn't think about it as love at that time, maybe a little bit. But it's the best form of leadership, and everybody's a leader. No matter whether you're the lowest person on the totem pole or not, your actions change the actions of those around you. So you're leading, right? And if you're kind, it's always going to bring the best out of everyone around you.
Yeah. So this makes me think of this guy I went to school with. He very clearly was on the spectrum, and it was interesting because I was in school for becoming an occupational therapist, and a huge part of our scope is working with people on the spectrum. And it was so interesting to me how many people were rude to him, really just tried to make him an outcast. And there was a time where I certainly was not acting how I should have, and I wasn't ever being mean to him, but there was times where I didn't particularly want him to be in my bubble because he never brushed his teeth, and that was, anyways. So, but it was interesting though, because no one ever wanted to give him grace. And very much that last year of school, I tried really hard to talk to him and be inclusive with him. And, when he would do these oddball sort of things that everyone else would just be very harsh about, I just tried to remember, he's not doing it on purpose to be this way. He can't help it. And there's things we can do to help him, so why aren't we doing that? Why is everyone being mean instead of just showing him kindness and trying to help him improve? And I will never forget how that changed his character towards me. And I saw things in him that I never saw before. Like, he was doing very thoughtful things, and whereas normally he just kind of focused on himself, and not in a bad way, but just didn't really care about anything except for school. And it was just very telling of how important it is to really try to find the goodness in people, because it's there if you look for it. And even when there are things that they do that are difficult, the answer shouldn't be to give up on that or to be negative about that. The answer should be trying to help them.
Well, and I think, especially with the way society is sort of going recently, right? Where very few people are interacting with one another. And I think that causes a whole other set of issues with, social interactions, and people seems to be like people are getting much, much worse at that, right? Especially kids. Their interactions are very odd, right? It almost seems like more and more people are on the spectrum, so to speak, almost. But I don't think they are. I think it's just lack of experience, or how many people are on the spectrum that we've interacted with or something like that. And the moment you start to interact with them, they do pick it up. They just haven't had the opportunity because maybe they struggled with it earlier on or whatever. I think about my friend Matt, who 3/4 of his brain hemorrhaged, in a football game and in our senior year. And they never thought he would even walk or talk or anything ever again. And miracle of God, he did. But he'd lost every understanding of social interaction. Like, that part of his brain was just wiped clean. He was much, much more imaginative, which was interesting to see. But his whole, and he was very creative after that, very different from the way he was before, but no social skills whatsoever. And so when he came back to school, he'd already done everything he needed to sort of graduate. And so he ended up, he was like, stuck to my hip almost, because we were really good friends. And so his parents and everybody, were like, hey, like, Lars, do you mind taking him around school? Just so that he can get used to being around other 18-year-olds or whatever, right? And I was like, oh yeah, because his siblings are like, elementary school kids, right?
Yeah.
And so that was his understanding of social interaction at that point, was what he had done with his siblings. And all it took, it was awkward, right? Because Matt was huge, like 250 pounds, 6'4", like just monster of a Russian human being, kind of dude. And you've got him acting like, an 8-year-old or whatever. So that was interesting and whatever, and having to like, hey man, like, no, that's not appropriate or whatever, but I'm not at all saying that anything special about me. I enjoyed every moment with him. Like, it was great to have my friend, there. But just being, I don't know what would have happened if there wasn't somebody there to be kind to him, and help him in those experiences. Because there were times that he was very inappropriate, or, especially for like what is essentially an adult man, or whatever. And so, hey, like, but giving him kindness and grace allowed him to make those mistakes. And, he's a functioning member of society now, right? He'll never be the same Matt he was before that, but in some ways kind of more fun. He's way more creative and imaginative now, right? And way more loving too, which is very interesting to me. But anyway, just kind of going all back to that, right? Like, kindness brings the best out of people.
Yeah.
So
that's all people want in this world, is just kindness.
And so that then brings us to love finds favor, right? Day 49. And we get Proverbs 3:3-4.
Yeah. So, do not let kindness and truth leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So you will find favor and good repute in the sight of God and man. So what I was thinking of when reading this is, so I think we should always be truthful. I saw that. But
I almost missed my mouth.
There's kind of an essence of how some people treat being truthful. Like, they can take it with a bit of arrogance, or they can use it to slight other people, and those kinds of things. And so just because you're being truthful doesn't mean you're being kind,
Yeah, the way I remember this now. The way you present the information can change it from, loving to hateful and vice versa.
Yeah. And so I think it's always most important to be truthful, but making sure you're still saying it in a way with kindness, which can be difficult in some situations when someone's maybe not being kind to you.
Yeah.
But imagine how different you're going to make their reaction if they're coming at you and kind of aggressive, or they're trying to antagonize you, and you come back with this kindness, but that's also honest and truthful. They're either going to be taken back and kind of feel like a turd, or they may continue with their behavior, but somewhere deep down or down the road, they're going to remember that, and it's going to sit with them. And you may never see them again and know what comes from you being that way, but it does make a difference. People being able to see other people being kind, maybe when we would say they wouldn't deserve it,
Well, and I underlined a bunch of stuff here and then sort of sectioned off a whole section that I thought would be good to sort of
just read all that?
But, well, before I lose my thought, one of my favorite sort of conversation, I think Christ's message is constantly like kindness and love are going to be the things that solve all the problems in the world, right? And that always sort of leads me to one of my favorite writings from Lao Tzu, which is that if two equal armies meet on the battlefield, the one with mercy will win. Because, and I guess, I don't know, that's sort of how my brain works, is in weird war analogies or whatever, probably best. But, so I think that message to me, right, and thinking about it from that perspective of, love finds favor, and how we can, if you have mercy, you're still going to fight, right? You still need to present the proper, the truth, right? But if you do it in a merciful, kind, favorable way, you are more likely to succeed in helping that person to, take the truth and accept it, versus how many times have you been in an interaction and you're telling somebody the truth, but if you're nasty, they don't want to hear it.
Yeah, they don't
care, right? They're like, screw you, dude, you're mean, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever. I would use other words, but I'm trying to get better at that. So, I think, but if you have mercy and you can be like, hey man, you can actually show them how much you love them, it changes, right? And you're more likely to succeed.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Shall we read the prayer?
Sure. I guess we kind of already talked about that, right? This whole section is just gentleness and kindness. The way you say things matters.
Yeah.
And allows people to focus on the truth rather than the way you presented it.
Yeah.
So yeah, sure. I think that can kind of close us out. There's no questions for this week like there usually have been.
Yeah.
Instead, we have a prayer, and so we'll close out with that right after. Just hey, thanks for being with us. If you have any questions, any thoughts, please go ahead and leave them in the comments and help us out. If you have any ideas on how we can be better, whether that be about this or more importantly about our relationship with God and together moving towards God, leave a thought.
Yeah.
And with that, you want to lead us out with the prayer?
Yep. Heavenly Father, help me to walk in kindness and truth. Give me the foresight to hold my tongue until I can filter my words through the standards of honesty and love. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you
Thanks.
next week.
Get wrecked.